Okay, so I wanted to make a real quick video. Basically, what I've been working on lately is trying to get some character identity figured out for each of the playable characters in the game. Something I've always liked about some games, like Overwatch, particularly good at it, is even if you have like this really basic, boring character model like this, it's not particularly interesting. Just by posing them in a certain way, you can create, all kinds of different character poses, and these poses can lead towards the character having, certain personalities, where, oh, this guy is, more forward, and he's, confident, and he's ready to go, or whatever. So, you make these different poses, and you get different character personalities. Something like Overwatch is really good, like Moira, even if she's not doing anything, she's not attacking or moving, she's just standing there, you could tell that her personality is like very poised and confident and kind of hoity-toity. And if you have Lucio, even if he were just a basic boring model like this, you could tell that he's like a very athletic, quick, on his toes, kind of wiry character. So I like having the personality sort of displayed just purely by how they stand or how they walk. So I decided to pick standing because to me, fighting game character has a whole ton of animations, like 60 to 70 animations or so in order to build the character, and all these things come together to create their overall personality and how they work. But I think you can get a lot of the personality just from standing, then the rest of that can translate throughout all their other animations to really create the full identity for them. And so one thing that I believe is that standing is kind of like the most base form of an animation. Like everything is derivative of standing, it feels like. Like you start with standing, then you build everything else. Like standing as an animation leads directly into crouching, because crouching is practically like standing, just lower to the ground, you have to reposition the legs and so on. Falling is a lot like standing, you just kind of dangle the legs, dangle the feet, rearrange the arms, maybe change the posture a little bit. Jump is kind of like transition into crouching, into standing, give it some upward push, like exaggeration, so that the legs are over exerted, and then it should lead into a falling position. Um, Standing has a lot of personality in it, so creating the character's walk, do they walk like very upright with high posture, or do they kind of slouch and so on? You can get a lot of that from standing. Standing, if you pull it back, you can get like hit stun. If you just put the arms up, you can get block stun. If you extend the arms out, you could get push block. And then it's the same thing. If you take the upper body and just apply it to the crouching pose, to where you have the character's crouching, but it's doing some of these hit stun and block stuns, then you get the crouching hit stuns, the crouching block stuns, the crouching push block. And so that's kind of just how I've been looking at it, is if you start with standing, everything else can come from that. So that's what I decided to do, is just take each of my characters and think, what are their personalities? I have, I don't know, 25 to 35 kind of characters or so. It's about 30 right now that are just mapped out in my head, and none of them are like fully fleshed out. I've been working on just one in particular to try to build the game, but I have a whole bunch that are planned that I'll hopefully eventually be able to get to. So just to go through like a few of them, like for instance, I made sure to stick with the same boring model every time, because it's one thing to be able to display the personality of a character with a proper model that really sells the whole aesthetic, but it's a whole different thing when it's just a boring model. It's like having a great actor who can still sort of become the character, even though they're not in costume, they're not in, fancy makeup or special effects makeup or CGI or anything like that. It's just like the actor can portray him. So this is the alchemist. He's kind of this like creeper guy. He's kind of lurching forward. He's got his arm kind of curled back like he's ready to just reach in and claw you. He's got a sickle. Just kind of a weird choice of weapon. You know, that's for like gutting something. There's this barbarian. He's just ready. He's got a wide stance. He's just, you know, ready to jump on somebody. The bionic, I mean, he's just self-explanatory. He's pretty crazy. The Bone Mancer, this guy's kind of relaxed. He has minions that he summons that fights for him, so this makes sense. You know, he's just kind of relaxed. He doesn't, you know, he doesn't have his guard up. He's not holding his weapon like he's ready to swing it. He's got this hand kind of casually like ready to cast spells or something. So it's just, you know, because he's not the fighter. He has minions who fight for him. He's clairvoyant. Obviously seems a bit arrogant. Very good posture. He's obviously like a magic user of some kind. He's floating. He's got this ball that's also floating. He just seems to be controlling all this stuff like with his magic, you know, with his mind. He's got an arm behind his back like he, you know, is not threatened by what other people do. The Dragoon is just kind of ready, like he's got this spear, you know, he's ready to get into joust position or just go for like a long ride or whatever. Druid's just kind of relaxed, not over anxious or anything like that, just sort of calm. But in werebear form, he's just kind of reckless. He's got his arms pulled all the way back. He's got his face forward. If you imagine him having like big teeth showing and that kind of thing, he's got a wide stance. So it's kind of a wild and reckless kind of fighting position to be in, really. You know, this guy's just kind of leaned back, just, oh, I can parry anything. He doesn't need a shield or anything like that. He just, weapon way over here. His stance is kind of long, like, oh, I can keep you at a distance. You know, I got this long sword, I got my arm fully extended out. Just with, you know, flick of the wrist, I can keep you at maximum distance away from me. I don't even need to block or anything. You know, Elementalist, this guy, just bad posture, probably not very athletic. He's got this staff that he's also using like as a walking stick. So, you know, it probably gets by using magic and just not physical ability at all. Engineer's kind of a bit of a confrontational. He's got a shock baton is what that weapon will be. He also has gadgets and stuff as part of his character design. So it's just going through a lot of the characters and just seeing like, you know, what kind of personalities can you bring in. This is actually supposed to be like a mech character. By the way, I didn't do any weight painting, and this is not rigged correctly for this kind of purpose, which is why it looks really funny, why it's like destroying parts of the mesh. But that's supposed to be like a mech monstrosity. It's just all kinds of weird body proportions. Another thing I think about in fighting games is like the silhouette of a character. So can you quickly identify a character just by the silhouette that they have? You know, this guy's using a shield with his right hand. Traditionally that's like the dominant hand, so it's kind of interesting that he chooses to use a shield as his dominant hand. The priest isn't even interested in fighting. He's got his hands down. He's reading a book. A lot of his stuff is going to come from spells. This guy's obviously like very light on his feet. You know, very agile kind of person. Kind of keeps low to the ground. Dual wields. Probably a very fast character. You know. So it's just going through all these characters and just putting them in these poses and kind of seeing how do they come to life, despite having a really boring, you know, faceless kind of model. And then I just kind of color block different parts just so it's a little bit easier to tell where the different limbs are. Like for instance, because this hand is red, it's a little more obvious that it's kind of behind his leg there. It's kind of the reason why I like Mickey Mouse wears gloves. It's because if he didn't wear gloves, you couldn't tell where his hands are, if they're in front of him or behind him. But, yeah. So then down here, what I did was I took the characters that are above, and I just kind of grouped them together. Like these 3 characters here all use a staff. I just wanted to make sure, like, okay, if multiple players were playing the game and picked these characters and they were all on screen, would you be able to tell them apart easily? And I think so. They have, this guy's posture is a lot different than his. This guy's got this like real lean forward. I mean, this guy has the staff in his right hand. He has the staff in his left hand. Just the part of his body that you're seeing is a little different than this guy. Like you're seeing a little more of a front view, a little more of a side view. He has a couple characters that float, you know, again, silhouette. Do they look different? And do their personalities seem different? This guy's got his hand behind his back and he's floating the ball and everything. This guy's got a knife in his hand. He's got his hand forward. He's probably a little bit more of a hands-on kind of mage, whereas this guy is just, you know, reliant on magic itself. And just, yeah, so here's a bunch of the casters. You know, I think they all come out looking pretty different from one another. Here's 3 characters that use a shield. Again, this one has it in his right hand. These 2 have it in their left. This guy has his hand all the way back. He actually uses a whip. It didn't copy-paste over, I guess, but here he is with his whip. So he'll have a whip dangling all the way behind him, whereas this guy has like a melee weapon that he's holding forward. So they have pretty different stances, really, and so different silhouettes. And so what I like with all these different characters is that this pose shows a decent bit of personality, but also the characters all look very different. So I think when you take the fact that all these characters have come out pretty unique, then like from one another, and if you were to add in not only just a standing pose, but a standing animation, where maybe they move around, they walk, you know, they bounce around and that kind of thing at different speeds. Some characters a little faster than others, or a little slower. And then add in your other attack buttons, add in the different walk forward and dash forward and walk backwards and all these different animations, and then also couple that with unique models for every single character. I think it's going to end up putting it on a path to where each character has a pretty unique identity and they don't all just overlap. I want to avoid the problem where, like, in Street Fighter, there's these characters like Ryu and Ken and Gouken and Akuma and Sakura, and you know, all these characters that just sort of have really similar stances, really similar identities, really similar move sets, and it just kind of becomes redundant. And I think it wasn't until games like Street Fighter V that they started trying to push the characters in different directions. So I'm just trying to avoid some of that redundancy and just kind of keep all the characters interesting. And I think a good way to do that is to just design all of them at the same time, so that you're kind of designing them in a way to not step on each other's toes. Like, you know, if you're making Ryu and Ken and Akuma and you know you're making all 3, and you make them all 3 at the same time, make them all different. Whereas if you make one and then later on make another and later on make another, it's a little harder to create that space between them because the first one's already kind of set in place. So just designing all these characters, it'd be quite a long time before I ever actually create them all and implement them all, but I think it's a good starting point. I'll probably bounce around the list when I actually do make them. I'm not going to make them in alphabetical order. I'll probably just make them by whatever makes the most sense as a staple of the game. You know, I started with the Paladin so far because he just seemed to be the easiest choice as well as pretty good for creating different programming things. Like he has a projectile, he has a heal ability, he has a buff spell. So, you know, just trying to make some choices that kind of support game development in a way that makes it a little better of a workflow. So this is what I have so far. I'll probably add more characters or remove characters and so on, but that's where I'm at for now. I think the next step will probably be to try and give each of them their own unique models. And so that's that.